Oh, it's 9, so we can begin. So we're going to pretty much start on time to respect everybody's schedules, because I know some people have very close, tightly packed schedules, but this is recorded. So if anyone has missed anything, you can watch the recording. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm very excited about this first, hopefully in a long line of workshops. And I'm going to give it to our NSF panel, who are going to be answering basic questions and discussing the NSF career from the NSF perspective. Okay, I'll give it to you guys. Thank you. I'll let you introduce yourself since you know more about what you do than me.
All right. Thank you, Ronke. Thanks for putting this together. I'm going to let Jean Van Briesen, our CBET Division Director, provide some opening remarks before we start the panel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for inviting me today. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jean Van Briesen. I'm the Division Director in the Division of Chemical Bioengineering, Environmental and Transport Systems, or CBET, within the Engineering Directorate at the National Science Foundation. And I am going to provide brief overview remarks and a welcome, and then I'm going to apologize and quickly exit the room because I'm supposed to be in another meeting at this same time. So I won't be able to stay for the panel, but I'm sure that our program directors will be able to answer your many questions. Meeting your program director is probably the first and last piece of advice I'll give you associated with engaging with NSF. So it's great that so many are here to talk with you. So I do want to briefly mention CBET, although I know many of you won't necessarily be applying to CBET, but our particular mission is fundamental research, innovation in education and in research in areas that involve transformation and transport of matter and energy by chemical, thermal, and mechanical means. And CBET spans lots of disciplines, as most parts of NSF do. We aren't necessarily divided the way you might see academic organizations be divided. So CBET funds researchers from lots of different academic disciplines and from many different types of institutions. I do want to give you some of the highlights of the career program, since this is a career workshop. And this program is focused on supporting early career faculty who have the potential to serve as academic role models in research and in education, and to lead to advances in the mission of their department or organization. So this is a program that's about the people part of science. It's about an investment in the people who do science and engineering, as well as an investment in the science and engineering research itself. That's not true of all programs at NSF. We have programs focused on people, we have programs focused on research, and we have programs like the career that are really to incentivize engagement of academics and their institutions in both the research activities and the educational activities, or an integration of those two activities, which some of you may know is central to the original vision of NSF. The original vision of NSF, that by funding both researchers and their research, we were kind of getting double duty. We were getting to fund the research success and also to fund individuals who would go on to do additional research in the future. So this career program is really focused in that critical space of putting a firm foundation into your activities as a researcher to set the stage for a lifetime of your contributions in research and education. I also want to mention that NSF is committed to broadening participation in the scientific enterprise, and individuals from all types of institutions are invited to apply for all of our awards, including the Career Award. We're also interested in increasing our applications from institutions that have been underserved in the past, and from individuals who are members of groups who are underrepresented in science and engineering. That could include women, racial and ethnic minoritized communities, and individuals with disabilities. And finally, I want to close with mentioning a little bit of advice, a critical component about applying to NSF. So a couple of pieces. Your application should align with the objectives of one or maybe more than one of our programs. So it's important to look at the NSF website and identify the program that fits and think about what's going on in that program. One way you can do that is at the program site at the very bottom, you'll see a link to recent awards from the program. It's a great idea to look at those recent awards so you can see what's been funded in the past in that program. That site will also have contact information for the program directors. And it's a really great idea to reach out to your program director with the idea for your research and education plan. And I'm sure the program directors here are going to talk more about that, as well as answer questions you have about the best way to engage with them and the best way to put your research on a path for success. With that, I'll close. Again, thank you for inviting me to be here, and welcome to everyone who's come for the workshop.
Thank you, Jean. All right, so I guess we'll move right into the panel, and we can start with some introductions of ourselves and then a little bit perhaps about our program. And then it's really just for you all. We are here for you to answer your questions. So I'll start, and then Steve, and then Wendy. So my name is Stephanie George, and I'm the program director for the Engineering of Biomedical Systems program that's located within CBET. And I've been in this position for about almost 2 years, slightly under that. I'm a rotator from East Carolina University, where I'm an associate professor. And in general, my research is on cardiovascular biomechanics. For the program, Engineering of Biomedical Systems, we're interested in leveraging engineering approaches to increase our knowledge about physiology and pathophysiology. So many areas can come under this. So this might mean tissue engineering. It might mean, looking at interactions between biomaterials and physiology, modeling all different types of projects. And so I'll pass that on to Steve.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, I'm Steve Peretti. I am the program director of the Cellular and Biochemical Engineering program, also in CBET. I was a rotator for 4 years from North Carolina State University. I am now permanent, so I've been in this position a combined almost 5 years. My research was focused on various aspects of metabolic engineering and synthetic biology. And the program itself, as sort of described by the title, is about cellular and subcellular level behavior that can have an impact on some aspect of biomanufacturing. So whether that's protein design, antibody design, synthetic circuit design, any number of cellular-based design and characterization activities are the sorts of things that we support. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Crone. I'm a newer program director to the National Science Foundation. I'm in the CMMI, which is Civil, Mechanical, and Manufacturing Innovation. The programs that I support are BMMB, which is Biomechanics and Mechanobiology, and MOMS, which is Mechanics of Materials and Structures. As BMMB's name indicates, we fund research, fundamental research in the areas of biomechanics and mechanobiology. And the MOMS program also funds some bio-related research as well. Generally, it is a smaller portion of our portfolio and oriented towards biomimetics and the mechanics of biologically created materials for different kinds of applications. I'm also a rotator, and I'm at coming to the NSF from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I've been a faculty member for 24 years. And my research has been primarily in the areas of experimental mechanics and most recently biomechanics related and touching on cardiovascular and skeletal muscle research.
So I am going to moderate this. Let me add the spotlight. So while people are gathering their questions, if you want to chat them to me and then I can call on you, or if you want to chat your questions to me and I can ask them, while you are doing that, I'm going to ask one question. While I was going through and assigning people their different coaches, people put down what their what program they would be applying to. And oftentimes I thought that it could fit in multiple programs. And so when I was applying for mine, what I did is I went to the award search and put in keywords to try to find people who did stuff similar to me and who funded them. Is there a better way to figure out where you should go, or is the best option talking to your program director or talking to a bunch of program directors? Like, what would you recommend people do to identify the best fit?
Right. So Steve, I know your hand is up, but I could take this if you want. I'm not sure if that's what your hand's for. All right.
Go ahead.
So I think reaching out to the program director, as Jean said, I think that's the most important. It's helpful to at least figure out which program directors to contact to take the approach that you did, Ronke, which is, looking at the awards using those keywords. But if you're still not sure, and even if you think you're sure, it's still good to check because, programs can kind of vary over the years, depending on the program director. And so always confirming with the program director is helpful. If you think it does fall into more than one program, you could reach out to the programs together. That would work. So copying multiple program directors on the email, or you could start with the one you think is the best fit and then, go from there. What I do is when a request comes into me, if I think there might be overlap or the project may fit in better in another program, then I reach out to the program directors and then report that all that I find back out to the PI. So that's the approach that I take.
And I think it's important to comment that when you're reaching out to a program director, that you give them enough information about your proposal concepts so that they understand what it is that you're going to be putting forward. So attaching a one-page description of your research goals can be extremely helpful in allowing us to identify what's going to be the best fit for your work.
And when you do that, please don't use the NSF project summary page because it's largely worthless in identifying what program, because it takes too much time talking about those are important things, but in terms of identifying which program, you want to spend that entire page talking about the important fundamental issues that you're going to be addressing, how you're going to address them, what you expect those outcomes to be, so that we can get a good sense of whether this fits into the sorts of things that we support. And so I want to just agree with everybody else. The most important thing is to contact the program director or directors that you think will be receiving this proposal. They can tell you a lot about what their community is looking for, how the reviews work, what a reasonable budget level is, because those things can also vary program to program to some degree. So there's a lot of information that can be helpful to you, but you need to contact those program directors to get it.
I would say email is the best way to reach out to us.
Right.
Okay, then I am going to ask you guys another question. So when I applied 3 times and I got it on the 3rd one. And between the 2nd and the 3rd, I had what I felt was an epiphany, and I would like your perspectives on how accurate that epiphany was. So the 1st and 2nd time I applied, I wrote a research proposal for a 5-year project, and I did not understand why the reviewers had said at most this project could get like 5 to 7 papers. And I was like, that's great, right? And then I had the epiphany that this was not a 5-year project award. This was a Kickstarter for your career, and that you are funding the person for something that they will be known for in the field. And if you approach this as a 5-year one-off project, it is unlikely to be awarded. Would you agree, disagree, more nuance? What are your thoughts there?
I would agree completely. And what I would say is I counsel the folks who talk to me, think about where you want to be in 10 years and then think about where you need to be 5 years from now in order to get to that place. And that place 10 years from now is what you want to be known as, primarily. And because it's not an extension of your PhD work, it's not an extension of your postdoc work, it's how do I get from where I am now to where I really want to be down the road. So I agree completely with yes, it's a jumpstart to your career, not just a project.
I agree. I don't have any additions.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think sometimes it can be more explicitly described in the proposal for the reviewers, and that's helpful. But if they recognize that this work doesn't have, once you've answered these questions, it's not clear where you would go next, then you would fall into the problem of, well, this isn't really foundational for a career, and maybe get some of the feedback that's sounding like what you had received.
And then another question. So I think sometimes there's confusion amongst junior faculty over whether or not there needs to be an educational component and an outreach component, or if those can be integrated into one, or if you have to have one or the other, or how that is supposed to look.
So the requirement is an integrated education and research. So I think what that education is can be very broad. And so, and perhaps when you say outreach, is that meaning to just a not traditional educational setting, or does that mean not outside of the institution?
So a lot of people that I have who have asked me for advice, they view it as I have to make a class and I have to make an outreach component to the community. And this is how I'm going to do that. But it's like a checklist, and that's how they understand it. And I'm relaying that to get better clarification.
I would say there's no checklist on what needs to go in there. It should be tailored to the PI. It should be tailored to the institution, what will have impact in that area, or, where they're able to interact with, if that's students or the community. So I would say there's no checklist that's required.
Steve, did you want to comment?
I would add, if you're going to do a class, make sure that the class is really related to the research, because that's a criticism often, like they're working in this area and they're just going to tangentially, augment this class with some kind of information. So make sure that it's an outgrowth, if you will, of the research. The other thing I think I would say is, as faculty members, you're expected to develop classes anyway, or teaching modules or something. And so another thing that the reviewers are looking for is, what additional value is this award going to be giving to your educational activities, your outreach activities, whatever those activities are that are going to be integrated and part of the plan. What are you going to do that's above what you're hired to do in the first place?
Yeah, I agree with those comments. And what I have coached junior faculty on for many years is the need for you to feel engaged and passionate about the thing that you're proposing. So if you approach it as a checklist that I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm just going to do those things and it'll all be taken care of, it's going to come through the proposal looking like that. So you should be choosing something that you are genuinely excited about. And it's entirely reasonable for you to leverage existing programs that are either on your campus or in the community. But as Steve was indicating, like what's new, what will you bring to that's new and different beyond what is already happening. And it can take many forms. It can be a lot of different things. And you need to find the thing that you're passionate engaged with, because that will shine through in your writing about it. The other thing that I always try to remember to mention to people is, think about, as you would with research, you would go and look at what's been done before. You would go and search the literature with whatever you would propose in your education plan or the broader impacts and how you're going to frame that. You should also look at what's been done before. You should not be reinventing the wheel. You should be aware of what's happened previously and utilize that knowledge and build upon that. So if you're proposing something that looks quite similar to what many proposals look like, and you don't seem to be aware that these kinds of things are already happening, that's a little bit problematic. You should be aware of what's going on already, cite that existing activity, and then think about, what's going to be your contribution. Maybe this is new to your community. Maybe this is some new aspect of this that hasn't been done before. And then don't forget about trying to do a bit of assessment.
I would really emphasize or support Wendy's comment about assessment, because often folks get so caught up in, I'm going to propose something new, something novel, something exciting, either for the education or for the outreach. I'm going to make a podcast. I'm going to do these things that seem really cool. And reviewers say, how do you know that that's effective? Like, what does effective mean? How are you going to assess the results of your educational efforts, your outreach efforts? And they're really looking for, your research gets assessed in a way by peer-reviewed publications. Your educational and your outreach needs a similar assessment of some kind. And so think about getting up with maybe some of the educational research folks on your campus or something else to work out, here's how we're going to determine that these efforts, have a positive impact, and if they don't, how we can modify them. So really the assessment part doesn't sound as important, I think, as it really is for those efforts.
Also, building on that, and also what Wendy said, you all are probably involved in outreach or education activities already, and sometimes in proposals it's difficult to tell and separate what have you done versus what you're going to do with this career. What's the value added from the career? And so thinking of it almost as preliminary evidence, those activities that you've been doing as preliminary evidence, just like you would for research, they're preliminary evidence for your education plan. And really separating it and letting the reviewers know, okay, this is what's new, and this is what, how this award will add that value.
And to add to that, I would say that a lot of universities, you probably get it in the spam email that you get from your university where it says, come to our workshop and learn how to teach better. They will help you assess it. And so if you reach out to them, because you don't want to propose something, an assessment metric that has been demonstrated to not be good because you've never assessed teaching before, and that's their expertise. And in addition, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people asking clarification questions about what to send the program officer. And since this is being recorded and the recorded version won't have the chat, can you talk a little bit to the questions and the answers that you're providing that are wonderful, but I'd like to get them documented.
Yes, I think in one of them I emphasized the fact that please don't send the project summary, because you're trying to figure out program fit, and the intellectual merit and broader impacts are not as relevant to answering that question. They're relevant to the effectiveness of the proposal overall, but you really want to figure out where your research home is, where it's going to get its best review. And so spend that one page describing the research, the approach, the importance of the question, the novelty, the the way you're going to analyze the data that you generate, the impact that you expect it to have, what you expect the results to be. So you want to do that. Does somebody want to take the question about preliminary data? Because there was how much preliminary data and what does it mean?
So at least in the BMMB and the MOMS program, we don't expect there to be preliminary data for a career proposal. And if it's there, that's, can be helpful, but it is not a requirement for there to be preliminary data.
And if you notice, I used the term preliminary evidence because evidence can mean preliminary data from your own lab, but it could also mean, supporting your argument with literature or just a really well-argued case that, combining these things, this knowledge, this is what we're expected and this makes a sense for the questions that we're asking.
And if you think about the role that preliminary data plays in your proposal, it does two things. It establishes the validity of your hypothesis or your approach, which can be provided by literature. And it establishes your expertise and your ability to execute the particular project, which can also be supported by your publications that come out of your postdoc, your graduate school. And so you don't have to have worked on the specific system that you're proposing, nor do you have to have generated the preliminary data that spurred this hypothesis and this approach that you're proposing to take.
I got advice from someone once that there's a difference between preliminary data on your project and preliminary technical data, and that the preliminary technical data just essentially establishes that you know how to do this, and it can be completely unrelated, but it just supports your cause that you can get it done. And I think that goes with what you were saying about preliminary evidence and just cosigns on everything you guys are saying.
There was a question about managed risks in the proposal. And what I would say is that while you lay out, I expect A to go to B, to go to C, to go to D, reviewers are also looking for, do you understand where the potential pitfalls are? And do you have a concept of how to get past them? Like, yes, I'm proposing that this might work. If it doesn't, I have another strategy to get the same kind of data. It may take longer, it may not be as detailed, something, but they want to, reviewers use that as an indication that you really do understand what you're doing. So you understand the risks involved and you have an idea of how to get around them, because they're going to pop up. Or else you're not really doing research.
And I would maybe suggest that if you're proposing something that's risky, the rewards should be high. So you want to make sure that the high risk efforts that you are proposing to do would have a fantastic payout if they're successful. And making that very clear is important.
Considering that there's a lot of people who are doing biomedical engineering and a lot of it has to do with health, can you guys clarify, because the NSF does not fund the same things that the NIH funds, and when people are trying to start their career, they're often applying to both, and sometimes there's confusion over the distinction and the disease and health, and can you guys talk a little bit about that?
So I think it's okay to talk about disease. It's okay to talk about the clinical perhaps motivation, although there should also be a scientific, fundamental scientific motivation too. But oftentimes that's in the broader impacts. So if there's going to be an immediate clinical impact, then that's not us, right? If the work is going to lead to an immediate clinical impact, that is not us. But if down the road it does, that's okay. If this is going to start you off in that direction is the first step. The one way I've heard it kind of explained is, NSF is a little more proof of concept and NIH is more proof of practice. So will it work, in the clinic? Will it go to the patient care?
The example I usually use in response to that question is a lot of my program funds research involving T cells and their modification and manipulation. An NIH proposal regarding T cells has an ultimate objective of increasing the rate of, tumor cell death. An NSF project related to or description almost of the same work would have an objective of understanding what makes T cells more or less effective against the model system from a fundamental perspective. And so if you just want a therapeutic outcome, that's NIH. If you want fundamental understanding of what drives different outcomes from a mechanism standpoint, that's NSF. And they can be almost the exact same project, just different objectives at the end.
And I would say BMMB is quite similar in that we're looking for, we can certainly fund proposals that are connected to human health. That human health potential outcome is, as Stephanie was indicating, something that we would consider part of the broader impacts of that research. And the research questions themselves should be much more fundamental questions about the system or behavior or the biomechanics or mechanobiology involved.
And this is where sending that white paper in can be helpful and
Right, you'll get that kind of feedback from us.
So there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to unmute and ask, because I think this is a more of an in-depth question.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Once I typed it up, I was like, oh, that is too long for this chat box. So thank you all so much. This is a question in regards to an RU program. So, I was really hoping to, add on to the RU program that I've been participating in for the past 4 years. It's an international RU. We take the students down to Costa Rica for the summer. And recently the lead PI left institutions and asked me to take over. And so I am now becoming lead PI on this RU site grant, for better or for worse. I'm very excited about it, but now I'm wondering about the possibility of trying to kind of weave that RU into my career proposal, or is that frowned upon now because, it's already funded? And so I don't know if that's anyways, I was also told this question that, maybe I wouldn't be eligible for a career anymore if I'm leading a site RU, but I didn't see that included in any of the paperwork. So I just wanted to kind of get your take on, seamlessly merging RU and career.
So
go ahead.
As I say, so it does not make you ineligible for a career. This is perhaps not well known, but you can request a RU supplement within your actual career proposal. And so you want to think, if you want to incorporate the RU, what's going to be the value added from this career award? So is it going to be topics or specific research projects for the students who are already in the RU program, or are you going to be able to add more students to the RU program through the career award? So I would think, what's the value that this career would bring to that? And it could provide some nice preliminary evidence for those activities.
And I would think about it similar to how we were talking about earlier as leveraging an existing program, right? So you just happen to be running that existing program, but you're leveraging that existing program, and then you're defining something that's going to be an added value because of the career.
Thank you.
Okay. Brian, you want to unmute? You had a question?
Sure. So I have a question about preliminary evidence and how it may be viewed with respect to novelty. So I'm a bioelectronics person, and I want to develop a new device platform for doing electrophysiology in engineered tissues. And the engineered tissue system that I'd like to study was developed in a collaborator's lab. So my novelty is the devices and the interfaces and the electrophysiological analysis. But the system came from a collaborator. So would that be viewed negatively with respect to novelty? And could I cite his papers as preliminary evidence?
I think this is you, Stephanie.
So what was one, I guess, going forward with the research, I don't see any reason you couldn't cite the papers of your collaborator. But going forward, the career you want to establish as, this is your career trajectory. And although you can have senior personnel, you want to make it clear that you're leading this and that you have some kind of command over the entire project. But I don't think there would be any issue with citing the collaborator's work. You do want to make the case, though, for what new knowledge will come from the project.
Your novelty issue is probably going to come about. You're proposing to create a new device. That new device should enable you to make measurements that we can't make now, so that we can learn about things that we really can't study very well now. And there's your novelty, there's your contribution. If you can't make that kind of an argument for the device, then you might want to rethink, what the device can do and what the important questions are with regard to electrophysiology and how to get a device to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Smita, do you want to unmute and ask, or would you prefer I
can do that. Thank you.
Okay.
So, hi, my name is Smita Rao. I'm from Michigan Tech, and I had a question about the career. Since it is a single PI grant, for some of my experiments, I do plan to use a facility in a collaborator's lab. And I'm not familiar with the tool, but I know how to use it for my application. So they are going to provide some expertise in using the tool and training my students to use the tool. How would I go about putting that in and not make it sound like it's a co-PI or another person on the proposal?
I think you've just described it, honestly. I mean, if it were a shared user facility, you would say, oh, I'm sending my students to the shared user facility. They're going to learn how to use, 2D whatever, and they're going to be trained to use the instruments.
Okay. And is it okay to budget them if that is the case?
Yes, as
Budget
long
their
as
time.
As long as it's clear that they're not defining the research questions, they're simply supporting you in your research questions and your research efforts. Because we're asking you to be novel and innovative, which means get outside of your envelope, which means you got to learn some new things, which means you're going to need some outside help. And so this is why we allow senior personnel to provide that kind of training for your students or whatever.
Thank you so much.
So I want to add to that. I had several things that I had zero experience in, and in my proposal, I wrote, this portion will be conducted by, Dr. So-and-so, and then in parentheses, C letter. And like there's a standard letter. Do not have them write you a recommendation letter. There's a standard letter that NSF wants that is the same across from everybody. But for every resource that I didn't know what to do, I said, Dr. So-and-so's lab will conduct this portion of that with my students' D letter. And it was very short, sweet, and to the point, and it wasn't questioned or commented upon.
You can also describe unfunded, if they're unfunded collaborations, those can go in the facilities, equipment, and resources document.
I have another question, if possible. So also, is the education component just restricted to US citizens or US programs? Because one thing I really wanted to do with this RU program, because it's in another country, is start to really integrate it with folks in that country who do work there as well. But I didn't know if that was something that NSF would support.
Are you asking about support for non US citizens?
Yeah,
RU
like
students?
bringing in some students from the universities in Costa Rica to participate in the program as well.
As participant support.
Mm-hmm.
I know for the RU that is not allowed, but I do not know within a career award if that is allowed or not.
That would take a little bit of research on our part.
Giovanna, you had a question?
Thank you. So this is somewhat related to the previous question. So somebody like a biostatistician who is not a senior personnel, because they're like our university offers like a biostatistician's course, so we can work with a biostatistician. How would they get, and obviously we have to allocate a small effort for their ability to help us with the proposal, but I was struggling to figure out where that goes under. I see the senior personnel, but that doesn't quite fit with this type of person. So how would that go in?
You can just
funded or not funded? Can you clarify if they're funded or not funded?
They would be funded, small but funded, yes.
That means they're going to show up on the budget. You're going to describe in the proposal how they're going to be helpful. And they're probably going to provide the letter that says, I'll do whatever it says I'm supposed to do in the proposal.
Got it. Okay, simple as that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you can utilize the budget justification too to describe a little bit more detail about this particular resource that you have available that might be somewhat unique to your campus.
Perfect. Thank you.
In the absence of questions, I want to add something that I tend to have to tell folks who failed the first time or the second time, and that is, remember that this is also an educational document. Not all of your reviewers are going to be absolute experts in your field, and no one is really expert on your project. And so you need to educate them about why your project is important, why what you're doing is really significant. And so, you're not writing a manuscript to all the smartest people in your field. You're writing to smart people who may be tangential, and know a little bit about what you're doing, but not everything. And so just make sure that you're bringing the average, really smart scientific person along with you so that they can follow what you want to do and why it's significant.
I generally suggest to go along with what Steve is saying, that you ask other people to read your proposal before you submit it, and that some of those people should be very close to your area of research so that they can look at some of the really fine details, but others of them should be a little farther away so that they can do what Steve is suggesting, and making sure that you're providing enough information for them to understand why it is that what it is you're doing and why this particular research is important. So having multiple people read drafts of your proposal is a really good idea. And I know that that can sometimes be a little nerve-wracking to have people reading and critiquing, but it is very, very worthwhile.
Rizal, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, since no one asked question. So my name is Rizal Hariadi. I'm a physics professor at Arizona State University. So in my first summer, I applied to career. I didn't get funded. I applied to New Innovator Award at NIH, and it was a big gift. I got the award. So I've been using so this was in 2018. So I've been using my time and resources to pursue other projects. I'm still not tenured, so I should be eligible for NSF career. My question is, what do you think about writing the proposal as the way I plan to tell the story is that I did training in the area when I was a graduate student and postdoc, and then I left the field and I want to return to the area because I had training and I had a track record. And I would like to use this NSF career, if funded, to be a key player in the field in the next 5 to 10 years. Would that be a reasonable, or they will say, well, you left the field, so what are you doing here? I don't know. Do you guys any advice before I start fully write the proposal this way? Thank you.
So do you feel that what you're, well, I was just going to ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
The funded work that you have with NIH, is it extremely orthogonal to what you would write your career proposal on, or is it just another area of research that you're pursuing?
Yeah, it's like anything else, it's a complex question, right? It's not completely orthogonal, but it's not a subfield of what I'm doing. And the thing is, I identify a new work in my field that I would like to pursue. So there is a paper in Science in March. I wrote a perspective for that paper. That paper is not from my lab, it's from a group in Japan. And I would like to use that technique as the core of my career proposal. I mean, I had training in the field, and I can make a case that I should be able to execute the project. But it's not a renewal of my New Innovator proposal. That's for sure. That's not the case.
If it's a new idea, we don't care that your background is 3 years old or
Okay.
however long it is. You have the background to do we're looking at the idea and how it's going to move your career forward.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want it to be an extension of
course,
project you've already gotten, regardless of where that's been funded. We want it to have, real innovative potential to propel you to a new place. So you don't need to describe the fact that you knew this and then you went away and then you came back. Like this is not relevant to the reviewers. They want to know what's really fabulous about this idea.
Okay, thank you. But one thing that I'm afraid, I mean, when we write proposal, we have to anticipate many criticism. They would expect papers in that area out of my lab since I've been running my lab for 5 years.
Not necessarily.
No,
I mean,
not necessarily.
I think
okay.
in your biographical sketch, you have an opportunity to, list papers that are most relevant to this project and papers that are impactful, probably more recent work. So it'll be clear that you've been an active researcher, and now you're coming to this particular area, utilizing these prior skills. So I don't think anybody's going to be counting years quite as much as you anticipate.
Okay, thank you.
But Stephanie may differ with me. I don't know.
No, I agree. I think that makes sense. I don't think you need to bring it to the attention of the reviewers, but having the documentation, that you can do the work is really what we're asking them to look for, as well as if the approach makes sense and is exciting.
Okay, thank you.
In regard to bringing attention to something, if you're writing your second one, it's a completely different panel. You do not need to say, oh, I got this criticism from the first one and here's the changes I made. Write the best proposal that you can moving forward, because it's new to the panel and they're looking at it as as a piece, not NIH has study panels that last for an extended time and your revisions go to the same folks. It's not the case here. So this is a standalone proposal.
And the reviewers don't know that you have applied before.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. So thank you all for providing all of the advice that you have so far. I guess my effort relates more to sort of the budget and how much effort typically goes into these awards. Is there an expected or minimum or maximum effort that is typically claimed? So is it the full summer salary, a portion of it?
So there's a maximum from NSF, so that's 2 months. I would say typical though is 1 summer month, but again that can vary. But NSF has a maximum of 2.
Okay.
And
Typical for BMMB proposals is 1 month.
Same here, and it also depends on your institution and what your budget. If your program director says your total budget is $550, and you have an institution that has very high overhead, you're trying to fund this thing. You're like, okay, maybe I can only afford a half a month, or something. But a month is fairly standard, and we try to support that across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess my estimation was a little too high. So it's good to know kind of what your expectations are and what you're.
Well, I think it's important to identify the program how we've talked about identifying the program that you'll be applying to. And then one of the key ways to find out, sort of the funding range for career proposals by that program is to type in to the NSF awards search engine, just nsf.gov, click on awards, search, type in career and whatever the, BMMB, if you're interested in applying to BMMB, and then look at recent awards and the dollar amounts that have been awarded in those cases. So we will occasionally in BMMB fund at 500, but generally it's a little bit more than that. But that varies by program. So do take a look program by program. What is the range that program generally funds in?
Perfect, thank you. I guess one quick follow-up to that question, if you don't mind. Sorry, I know there's a couple extras in the chat as well. So I'm currently in a medical school, and I know that the med school versus engineering or basic science department has differences in terms of that coverage. So I guess that's a conversation that we might be able to have with the program director in terms of effort on the award.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So now we have Hugo and then Anna.
I have a question regarding the objectives. Most of what I've seen, either from colleagues or online, are 3 objectives. Is it that combine the research and educational component, but how is it perceived? Is if, for example, we propose 3 research objectives and 1 educational component. Is there a limit to the number, or is, you know, I'm trying to relate to the aims in an NIH type submission. Is it overachieving, submitting 3 research versus 2 research, 1 educational goal, or how can you put on that? The number of objectives.
I'll give my answer, and then those who are more experienced can give theirs. But what I generally, you know, I don't see that panels are counting, you know, the number of objectives. What they're looking at is the research that's being proposed. And as we just finished up with a budget conversation, the research that you're proposing should be commensurate with the budget that is being requested. So if you are proposing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, doesn't matter how many, but the research is this big and the budget is only that big, that's a problem. Also, you know, if your budget ask is like this and you're only planning to deliver this, that's a problem. So there should be some good relationship between the budget, which has constraints to it, and the research that you're proposing. And, you know, sometimes that's going to, you know, neatly divide up into, you know, separate objectives, and other times it may not. And you just need to frame, at least for the proposals that I've been involved with in our division, you just need to frame that research so that it can be easily understood by the reviewers.
The other piece I would add to Wendy's is just when they look at the budget, they're looking at the staffing that you're proposing. So if you are proposing to fund 2 graduate students, you can do a lot with 2 graduate students in 5 years, as opposed to 1 graduate student or 1 postdoc or a graduate student and a couple of undergraduates. So when they look at that, they're looking at what can you get done with the personnel that you're proposing to place on this project? Not just like the budget number, but they're looking at that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So we have gone 2 minutes over into our break time, and if our NSF panel, I want to thank you guys. If you have one last question, and if they're still willing, I will ask them, but it looks like you have very well answered everybody's questions, and I want to thank you so much. And you are welcome to stay and eavesdrop, or you are welcome with our thanks to say bye. But we're going to have a 10-minute break. You can stretch, you can have a biological break, you can get some yummies or whatever you need to do, but this will be here. And we will return at 10:10 for everybody who wants to remain.
Thank you. And thanks for the great questions.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
So I would suggest when you get them back, I don't know, are many of them from PUIs, undergraduate institutions, or?
It was a mix. It was a mix of R1, R2, medical. Mm-hmm. It was and undergraduate institutions. So it was.
The reason why I ask is because I know that some PIs either feel intimidated because, oh, we only have a master's program, or it's primarily an undergraduate institution. What do I do? And what I would just say is make sure that in the description, they describe how the project can be cut up into pieces that can be done by the master's students, the undergraduates, you know, and how that's going to come together, because we do make awards, career awards, to folks at all kinds of institutions, some of whom have no graduate programs. And so, you know, that's not, an impossible hurdle. It just needs to be addressed with regard to how is the work actually going to get split up so that it can be done.